Blessed to be with you. Kevin Miller in the morning. You're home for Miller's Mission. Coming up next week, once again, we'll be living at the Walmart in Nampa, Garrity and Franklin. We've been doing this since 2010. Twice a year, we live homeless to help our friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. We're asking for people to join the Penny Patrol, like Jerry, like Trina, and like you. For more information, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com. We would love for you to be a part of it. We're going to be collecting money, goods, food, clothing, all next week from Monday through Saturday night at 6 o'clock. But we are starting the Penny Patrol now. We would love for you to help. Details at KIDOTalkRadio.com. Joining us now, our great friend, Lars Larson, Lars Larson Show. You can catch him weeknights at 6 right here on KIDO Talk Radio. Lars, good morning.
Kevin, how was your weekend?
Not bad. Had to, unfortunately, catch up on a lot of work. I love hearing about your weekend because you actually go out and live.
Well, this weekend it was Tina kind of hurt her back because she'd been pressure washing the house. And we don't have a huge house, but she, anybody who's ever gone, and I've done this, you go out and put your arms over your body for, a couple of hours holding onto a pressure washing wand. It'll do a job on you if you're not used to it. And so, but we got out and about and did a few things. And then next weekend we take our granddaughter to Disneyland.
Oh.
And Payson is now 3. This will be her 3rd trip to Disneyland, and she's a joy. I mean, it makes it all worthwhile.
Boy, I don't know how much of a vacation that is with a 3-year-old. That seems like a lot of high intensity.
Oh, no, this is the best way to interpret Disneyland because Tina and I, we love Disneyland. And when we first started dating 25 years ago, one of our first trips, maybe 6 or 8 months in when we'd been dating, was to go down to Disneyland. And it was fun as a young adult. I'll tell you what, watching a little kid experience Disneyland makes it all brand new. It really is. It's all brand new because you're seeing what she's reacting to, and it's fantastic. And so I have plenty of work trips that I have to take. So it's nice to have a trip where you go and you just have family with you.
Indeed. All right, Lars, we're going to start with the Kevin Miller softball here. Which state is more liberal, the one you work in or the one you live in?
Let's see. Well, that's easy. The one I work in is Portland, Oregon. I call it Havana on the Willamette River. And it is slightly to the left of Berkeley, California. And then the one I live in is Vancouver, which we sometimes refer to as Vantucky. So it's more conservative. And I think it suffers from the same problem that you've identified before, and that is you've said that you have a nice conservative place. You have people who flee from very liberal places that are going to heck in a handbasket because they're run under liberal policies like California. So the ones that are conservative who say, I can't stand it here anymore, they move to places like Boise, and then they say, but I'm really in favor of X, Y, and Z. And they bring the contamination with them. And I'll compare it to something that happened, I think, in the 60s. I mean, this is when I was a little kid, but I've read about it. People who suffered from allergies, many of them on the East Coast and on the northern tier of states, east of the Mississippi River, say, I've got these horrible allergies. I think I'll move to, say, Las Vegas or Palm Springs to get away from the allergies because it's nice and dry there. There's not much pollen in the air. But when they went, they said, but I've got to bring my X with me. And X was their favorite flower or plant that they were not allergic to. So they'd bring all those plants, all these, hundreds of thousands of people, to the new place that has no pollen. And guess what it has today? It has pollen from all these plants brought by all these people. They wouldn't bring the one they were allergic to, of course, but somebody else would.
Right.
So when you bring that contamination to a place, in this case Boise, then all you do is you transplant many of the same things you're fleeing. And yet people don't see it in themselves because they say, well, I'm not in favor of the high taxes in California, not in favor of the welcoming attitude toward people who are illegally in the country. But I want to bring this one policy with me. Or, they'll say, I'll vote for a politician who'll be in favor of this or that. And what you end up with eventually, and I think you've correctly identified the problem, is you will likely over time end up with a more liberal Boise City Council, a more liberal state legislature, and likely a more liberal governor. And they will bring some of the same policies that are laying waste right now to the state of California.
Our great friend Lars Larson joining us, Lars Larson Show, larslarson.com. Weeknights 6 to 9 here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. We've been talking about something that went on in your state last week and the whole controversy involving vaccinations.
Yeah, and it's still going on because there's a bill before the legislature, and this is the essence of it. In Vantucky, Vancouver, Washington, there was a huge outbreak, one of the largest ones in the nation, of measles. And it centered almost entirely in the Russian Old Believer community. And the way they were able to identify that was the initial 50 or 60 cases all occurred in schools in which the Russian Old Believers were a large part of the population, or all of the population in the case of a private school or two. And they're not necessarily upscale neighborhoods, but they also occurred in churches that are part of the Russian Old Believers. And I respect their beliefs. Here's the problem. If you come from another country and you say, and we don't agree with this vaccination stuff, so we're not going to do it and we're not going to vaccinate our kids, and you have a huge outbreak of measles, it has an effect. Now, I don't know how the state of Idaho does or Boise, but parts of Oregon have as many as 40 and 50% of the kids in a given school district who are not vaccinated against the most common childhood diseases. Remember, Kevin, in the year 2000, America had effectively eradicated measles. It didn't mean we didn't have a case now and then, but in a country of 300 million, we have a case now and then. It's usually a result of somebody who travels overseas, gets it, comes back, or a visitor from overseas brings it here. And we should have a high level of vaccination, and then what you get is herd immunity. If you have, say, 90% plus of adults and people vaccinated, then you don't end up with diseases being able to get a foothold. When you have a school of very young kids, and kids can be disease vectors, like it or not, so you have a large number who are not vaccinated. If a disease takes hold, it's likely to spread. And this year we have the highest level of measles that I think we've had in more than 20 years since there have been small outbreaks, but they seem to be getting bigger every year. And I'll tell you something else, 2 data points. One, there is a strong but very tiny anti-vaxxer community who I do not agree with, who don't believe in vaccinations. Some of them think it's a government plot. Some of them think the vaccinations actually cause the disease, scientifically provably not true. Some of them simply have not looked at history, or they've looked at history through a weird lens, and they see the end of polio, and they see the control of mumps and measles and rubella and diphtheria and whooping cough and a lot of other nasty diseases that have done huge amounts of damage to this country, but so long ago that most of the people who have a real recollection of the damage. I remember being vaccinated in 1968 for measles by my mom, who was a nurse, and I said, "Why do I have to do this?" And she said, "Because," I was okay. I was just curious. And she said, "Because you could get measles, and if you get measles, you and a woman who's pregnant, is exposed to you, her baby, or a woman with a brand new baby, since little babies typically are not vaccinated until age 1 because it's not medically advised. They can vaccinate them as early as 6 months, but when you have a brand new baby, it has some immunities that it got from mom. That little baby could die, and measles does kill. It hasn't killed recently, but it's a serious illness. And so when you have this, and so the law of the state of Oregon is you have to have vaccinations to go to school, with 3 exceptions today. One is if your doctor says it is medically not advised, that it would put you at risk, that you'd be in danger because of some medical condition you have. But the other 2 are religious, and there are very few religions that actually say you can't have vaccinations. In fact, I can't think of one right offhand. I've done stories on this before, but it's been a while. And then the second issue is philosophical. So in other words, right now the law in Oregon says if you say, "I just don't believe in it," then you don't have to get your kids vaccinated. So you send them to school without vaccination. Understand that what happened in those schools where the big outbreak occurred a few months ago is that all of the other unvaccinated kids had to be sent home out of as a precaution against them being exposed to the kids who had come to school not vaccinated and had measles. So 800 kids spent 3 weeks away from the classroom. And the teachers did their best to send lessons home and all the rest of this stuff. But it really seriously put a crimp in the education of those kids because they weren't vaccinated. And if the school allowed them to come to school and they were exposed to one of the kids who was sick but didn't know it yet, then they would get it as well, and it could have spread to literally hundreds of kids. So they sent the kids home. Now imagine this: your kid's not going to school. He's not sick or she's not sick, but he or she is not vaccinated because you philosophically don't believe in it. And I'll tell you the second piece, which ought to be concerning, for all the concern there's been about the Russians playing with our elections. One of the things the Russian bots, these are computer software programs that are designed to spread information through the web. The Russian bots have been promoting the anti-vaxxer activity. And this goes back to my theory that when the Russians messed with our election, they weren't messing with it for a particular result. They were just trying to create chaos. Okay? Create chaos because that's good. As long as America is occupied with other things, we tend to spend less time paying attention to Russia. So the Russian cyber activities were spreading misinformation about in favor of the anti-vaxxer movement in America, which is pushed by people like Jenny McCarthy and others, who's a celebrity, and it's really kind of disturbing because there isn't any science behind it at all. And there are an awful lot of false memes. I'll give you an example of one of the memes. What's the vaccine? There's one vaccine that was developed in the 1960s, and when they first developed the vaccine, they originally used some cells from aborted fetal tissue from the 1960s. All right? Now, it's not in there today, but what you get is non-scientific types who will say, if you take that vaccine, it has aborted fetal tissue in it, which is a lie, but it's, but you go look on some crazy websites and they'll tell you that. Now, what I gave you was the grain of truth that goes with it, that scientists in the 1960s developed vaccines against certain diseases, and as part of how they developed them, they used some human tissue, and it came from aborted fetal cells from the 1960s. But the idea that when you go get a shot for a particular disease, it's got aborted fetal tissue in it is false. But there's just enough history to make somebody be able to run a conspiracy theory on it. And the Russians are pushing this conspiracy theory because they realize it creates chaos in our population.
Well, Lars, we appreciate it. I know you're going to be covering that tonight and, of course, in your Northwest show. Lars Larson, LarsLarson.com. We appreciate you, brother.
You bet. Take care, Kevin.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. So, Lars talked about his thoughts on vaccinations. It's a hot topic here. Let's hear what you have to say next. 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Is it time to say no to vaccinations, or is that just a dumb move? Let's hear from you next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Actress Alyssa Milano first came to our attention on the 80s sitcom Who's the Boss? But lately, the now 46-year-old mother of two focused on some controversial adult issues. Her presence did not go unnoticed during Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings.
Alyssa friggin' Milano?
That's Matt Damon as Kavanaugh on Saturday Night Live. Concerned Kavanaugh and other conservative-leaning justices on the Supreme Court will overturn Roe v. Wade. Milano now urging women to go on a sex strike to protest tough new anti-abortion laws likely to come before the court. Calling the situation dire, Milano says she hasn't thought about how long she'll be on strike. Jane Metzler, Fox News.
And there you have it, the news you're not going to hear anywhere else. Alyssa Milano calling for a sex strike with review and commentary. And we'll wonder if he'll participate. Tea Party Bob on KIDO Talk Radio.
Mr. Miller, what a wonderful Monday morning. It's so great to be here again. I want to thank you for your show. Lots of good information. But as usual, I think Lars needs to give his talk on vaccines to the 20,000 or so people who have been harmed by vaccinations, which I wrote about last week and talked about. On Lars' comments about the newcomers to our state, I came here 26 years ago to get away from the maddening crowd of Wall Street in New York City. Idaho was a pleasure to live in for 30 years, after 30 years in New York City, and it really didn't matter where you lived. It was a great state. I have to say, in those 26 years I've lived here, things have changed quite a bit. And most recently,
Right.
which is really what happens to places like Idaho when they're discovered, we've seen Boise go from conservative to liberal, and Art in the Park go to Art in the Rocks and railroad cars. We've seen the gangs come and go and come again. And there have been sweeping changes and growth in the Treasure Valley with huge housing developments now being built and more schools to accommodate the growth. You know,
Well,
unfortunately,
now we have people
failure.
tagging the rocks at Catherine Albertson Park.
Well,
The
can you
taggers
imagine
are
how
here.
many rocks they could tag? We have lots of rocks here in Idaho.
I hear on the trails they're tagging away.
I don't doubt it at all. You know, unfortunately, we've had a failure of government to plan properly to keep up with the infrastructure. And even with the changes in the Treasure Valley, it still looks like a great place to relocate to, find a job, and raise a family. I've done a little bit of homework with some old Wall Street friends, and they're predicting another 8 to 9% increase in housing values in the Treasure Valley this year, as we have more people moving in than we have places for them to live. So if you're thinking about selling your house, you might want to price it accordingly, or maybe wait a bit to sell. You know, my confirmation of this actually happened this weekend when I saw a New York license plate driving down the street. You don't see very many of those in Idaho. It would be interesting to see if we are going to be invaded by the East Coast bastions of liberalism. You know, if that happens, we could see housing prices shoot to even higher numbers. I will say that this new growth, with the new growth, there's going to be a lot of problems, but we have some of the best responders, first responders living and working in our police, fire, and paramedic departments, with many moving in here, believe it or not, from California, trying to escape the craziness of what's happening there. What we need is some forward-thinking politicians for the challenging offices of mayors and legislators who are going to fix the problems we're facing. So,
Well, maybe you'll
for
run.
anyone who thinks, well, I'd never know. You know, it's very possible. You know, for everyone who thinks the Treasure Valley is going to the dogs, I would say we're going to see some change, but if we elect the right people, we get the right leaders in, things will be fine. And we're going to have problems with crime. It's inevitable. I say that because I was a victim of a hit and run this weekend in my development, where some crazed, out of control, probably drunk golf cart driver ran over my mailbox and sent it flying 20 feet down the street, and just kept on driving down a road without even glancing back to see what he hit.
And you live in the mayor's neighborhood, right?
Well, yes, we live right around the corner from Mayor Tammy.
So if this hit and run of the mailboxes is happening in Mayor Tammy's neighborhood, no one's safe.
Well, we did have some very good response by the Meridian Police Department. I have to say that. They were here in a jiffy and took all the information down, and hopefully they'll find that culprit that downed my mailbox. But I have to say, you know, when you look at the rest of this country, the Treasure Valley is a pretty darn safe place to live. So I would say anybody who's moving here is making the right move. I certainly wouldn't leave it. I may just head for the north, but I'm not leaving Idaho.
Well, you're retreating as opposed to the rest of us.
Well, I'm looking for a quieter place. You know, there's a lot of hustle and bustle down here.
Some of us are going
I'm not getting any younger.
Some of us are going to stand our ground and not retreat.
Well, I know you are, for one. But I think if you could move, you might think about it.
We'll never know now, will we?
No, we won't, unfortunately. Well, we're looking forward to you visiting us anyway. That I'm sure.
The soon-to-be pride of New Meadows, Tea Party Bob, we appreciate you. Thank you, sir.
Have a great day, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, our great friend Tea Party Bob. 8:28 is our time, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave.
I just flew in from the Windy City. The Windy City is mighty pretty, but they ain't got what we got. I'm telling you, boys, we got more life in Deadwood City than in all of Illinois.
There we have it. Doris Day, 97 years old. How many films did we grow up watching Doris Day? How many videos did we see of Doris Day in movies like Calamity Jane in 1953 and others that really reinforced America? Is there a Doris Day today? Do we have any type of Hollywood actress or singers that really embrace America? Or have they gone to the dark side where all they talk about, like Alyssa Milano, is what's wrong with America? Gosh, I miss Doris Day. Hope she's in heaven listening to our show right now.
Florida lawmakers are going forward with plans to allow individual school districts by county have teachers carry guns in classrooms as a means to defend against a mass shooter, but it would require approval and documented training.
Teachers that choose to go through this program will, in many cases, have more weapons training than your average deputy.
Florida Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez adds that since it's left up to counties, each local community can decide for itself, as can the teachers.
Even if we were to assume that a school district approves it and the sheriff's program puts together the training program, the teachers do not have to participate in the program. It's optional.
In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
And remember, when you're hearing Fox News, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Kevin Miller in the morning, Sean Hannity in the afternoon. So in Idaho, teachers can, I believe, conceal carry guns. They can be armed. They just have to get the approval of their local school board. Coming up, we're going to talk more about states advancing the heartbeat legislation, and should the Gem State take a look at that during the next legislative session. And do want to remind you, coming up a week from today, Miller's Mission, we're looking for the Penny Patrollers. All you have to do is collect your change, collect your cash, collect your non-perishable food items, clothing, sunscreen, water, you name it. We're collecting it for our friends for the Boise Rescue Mission. Twice a year, we live at the Walmart, Garrity and Franklin, thanks to our friends at Camping World Boise. We'll be there from sunup to sundown till Saturday night at about 6 o'clock, collecting items to help our friends with the Boise Rescue Mission. You know, everybody gives in the fall because that's the touchy-feely time of year, but in the spring and the summer, the need is still there, and quite frankly, because of the change in the tax codes, we need you now more than ever. For more details on how you can help Treasure Valley families this spring, this summer, check out our website, KIDOTalkRadio.com, or go to BoiseRM.org. John Decker joining us live from the White House. Yes, that White House with Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio from Fox News Radio. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you, Kevin. Hope you're doing well today. Hope you had a nice weekend.
I did, but all of a sudden we've got shaky markets, China this, America that. It's a crazy way to start the week.
Well, it is, and this is all because of essentially a trade war that's happening between the U.S. and China. The president announcing that he'd institute harsher tariffs on Chinese goods, tariffs going up from 10 to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. That was announced on Friday, and retaliation announced from the Chinese government this morning. Tariffs on $60 billion of U.S. goods. Those tariffs would go into effect on June the 1st, so there is some time to come to some sort of an agreement, just a few weeks, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a meeting of the minds. There are no new trade talks scheduled between U.S. and Chinese negotiators.
And yet you have Larry Kudlow on Fox News Sunday telling Chris Wallace that a couple weeks ago they were on the 5-yard line, and he still, at least Larry Kudlow, is optimistic. Do you think others in the administration share his optimism?
Well, I think Larry Kudlow is an optimistic individual. There's no doubt about it. I have not heard that same level of optimism coming from the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's office. Look, I think that after what we saw last week, which was the Chinese delaying their visit to Washington and then cutting their visit short, it doesn't give me room to have some optimism about the prospects for coming to some sort of an agreement, but anything's possible. Larry Kudlow is also right. I think that they were essentially on the 5-yard line, and China essentially wanted to change the terms of what they had previously negotiated, and that caused, the trade talks to break down. So that's where we are right now. And you see the reaction coming from financial markets because they recognize that this would not be good for the U.S. economy, the Chinese economy, or the global economy to have this continued trade war taking place between the U.S. and China.
All right, John Decker, let's switch gears. I was over at Tea Party Bob's house the other day before he moves to New Meadows, Idaho, and lo and behold, Saturday afternoon, I heard a familiar voice. Ran to the television, and it was our own John Decker doing some stand-up over the weekend. Do you ever rest?
I rest on Sunday, right? Like so many of us rest on Sundays. But this is something that Fox asked me to do. I'm glad that Tea Party Bob has his television tuned to Fox News on the weekends too. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it.
Well, and for those of us that do that, is there anything different from, doing the network TV as opposed to talking to folks on the radio?
Not for me. I've done television for a good portion of my career. Used to do television for Reuters Television for most of my years covering the White House. So no, it's just a matter of just you and I are having a conversation, and when I do it for Fox News Channel, I have a conversation with our anchors who are up in New York, and I just have the conversation to a different locale. Whereas I'm speaking in my office, my radio booth in the basement at the White House. When I do it on Fox News Channel, I'm speaking from the North Lawn from the White House, and you can see me. So that's really the only difference that I notice, between doing the two types of venues.
Well, we enjoyed the insight and the report as we do when we have you on every morning here, John Decker. We appreciate you, brother.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin. I appreciate it. I always enjoy being on your show. Have a great day. I'll talk to you real soon.
Yes, sir. Take care, John.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. John Decker joining us from John Decker to Bob in Sunny Slope, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. How you doing?
Me,
Turn my radio.
I'm living the dream, and you?
Oh, I'm living the dream too. So I was really disturbed at some of Lars's comments. Let me tell you. I guess my first question would be, what if it were his kid, or his grandchild? My grandchild was fine, wonderful, active, just wonderful kid until 18 months, and he got the measles vaccine and ended up with encephalitis in the hospital, and now has that big A word we're not allowed to say, autism. So he was fine before the thing, and it was an overnight thing. Overnight. There have been, let's see, I believe I'm reading here in front of me that there have been 2 measles deaths in 15 years, but there's been 127 linked to the vaccine. That's not something little. I have a friend who I probably have spoken of on this vaccine issue who was the top troubleshooter for NASA. So we're talking not even a child here. We're talking an adult, 55 years old at the time, a brilliant woman. Obviously, she was the top troubleshooter whenever our shuttles went off to NASA for the computers. And she went down for a vaccination from the place where you go, I guess the work doctor. She got a vaccination that night. She got encephalitis and meningitis. She was paralyzed. And after that, she hasn't worked for 25 years. She could barely put together a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without direction. That was from the vaccination. The idea that what I was really shocked at is he must have missed the news thing on it, because when they can culture this measles vaccine, and they have found, I believe last I read, 28% of them of the measles cases were from people that had the vaccination. I don't mean just had it. I mean the measles case they had was the strain from the vaccination. So it may not be they got it, but they got it from somebody they were near that had the vaccination, because they are contagious for a period of time. They recently, as I wrote to you, some of these vaccinations don't work well. The flu vaccination, according to a pro-vaccination thing, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, are only 44% effective. And I think of my son who was in the Navy and frankly got vaccinated for everything under the sun, including anthrax and smallpox. They just had to isolate a Navy warship because of the outbreak of, well, in this case it was mumps, but it's that same MMR thing. The vaccinations are not necessarily God's gift to the world, and they can cause damage, as I mentioned the other day, I having been one of them. The HPV vaccine has a list
So
of
to get to the point, you're saying people should not be vaccinated.
I'm saying it should at least be a choice. And actually, the research shows that I have read is that measles and mumps and chickenpox were pretty much eradicated before the vaccination came out because of nutrition and because of sanitation and things like that. No, I think if somebody wants to be vaccinated, that's fine. When I went down to visit family in Venezuela, back when it was a sane country, I was vaccinated for yellow fever because, frankly, it was endemic down there, and I didn't want to get it. I am not totally anti-vaccination. I would like to get a tetanus shot because I work at a farm, for crying out loud. But I can't because that's what killed me. But anyway, so I'm not totally against it. If you want to get vaccinated, that's fine. But to force people into something that is deadly,
well, that's what they're doing in Oregon.
I know. I'd be out of Oregon.
And that's a big point of controversy here in America, in Idaho.
I know it is, and I think I am very, very opposed to that. I really am. And the idea that the news is trying to shut this stuff down, they're trying to take books off the internet that involve this, that spread, and it isn't lies, it's spreading truth. It's spreading information. They don't want information out there that is not doesn't fit their scenario.
They're controlling the narrative. Barb, thank you for the call. Your calls are next. Coming up next, most states are advancing the heartbeat legislation. We'll tell you what that is and whether or not you believe that Idaho should be a part of it. And we've got some tagging going on. Happy Mother's Day. Some folks, probably from an out-of-state location, came in and did some tagging in the parks. Is this a sign of more things to come? Kevin Miller, Build That Wall, KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget, a couple big things coming up this weekend. Idaho's largest garage sale. Great deals, great fun. Expo Idaho. Looking forward to that. The Boise Music Festival coming up next month. Of course, a week from today, Miller's Mission. We're looking for penny patrollers. Want to thank Trina. We're going to go shoot a video with Trina. We got Jerry collecting pennies. We would love for you to collect pennies and dollars and cents and so much. Goods and services to help our friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. Now more than ever, thanks to the new tax codes, charitable giving is down. Please help support one of the few nonprofits that it does not accept federal funding. We've been partnering with the Boise Rescue Mission for almost 10 years, and certainly they do a lot of great work. This summer, the need is magnified based on the fact that everybody gives in the fall, and in the summer, everybody's on vacation. More information on how you can help on the KIDO Talk Radio app and on our website, KIDOTalkRadio.com. Talking about a few things of note. Catherine Albertsons Park tagged over the weekend. The CUNA Greenbelt tagged over the weekend. Now, if you don't know what tagging is, basically you have a bunch of jabronis, or as we would say, punks, come around and spray paint things. And they put their logos on them. You see it in big cities like Portland or Seattle or Los Angeles or the Bay Area. You don't really see that here in the Treasure Valley. It's a big deal. Now, you had a lot of people, and according to the Channel 7 story, I was watching the guy, he was wearing a Trump hat. A white guy with dreadlocks wearing a Trump hat. He and his family went out there and started scrubbing the Greenbelt just to make sure that it was good for everybody. Now, that truly is the spirit of the Treasure Valley that these folks that are here that are tagging certainly have missed. Is this a sign of things to come? Tess in Boise. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tess.
Hi, good morning. Oh, so many things in so little time. Just something quick, on the vaccines real quick, that I still read the Irish Times. If you want to take a look at some damages, from vaccines, go look at the narcolepsy issues with Irish children. But on tagging, I want to tell you that, so my daughter's home and a lot of other homes up on the bench were tagged here over the years. And the law enforcement said, well, these are the juvenile and teenager and young adult. These are the refugee gangs that are in the area here. So I want to encourage people, when you see tagging, no matter what it is, names, whatever, call Boise PD. They have a group that comes out and scrubs that, because what you're going to see is that these are gangs, these are groups, and just like an animal in the wild, they're marking their territory. And so make sure and scrub that, repaint that, but get Boise PD out there and get rid of it immediately. You'll see it on buildings, homes, fences, but get rid of it.
So you're saying this has been going on for quite some time?
Oh, yeah. There is a particular group that has been spray painting over here, in South Boise here for about maybe 2.5, 3 years. And what's been going on is that every time I see them, I call them in, and they send their group out, and that is removed ASAP. And there's a reason for it, because now that you have them being bigger and better and more colorful, it's not just artwork. Like I said, these are groups that are marking out their territory. So what you have to do is you have to say, no, this is my home, this is my territory. And you do that by removing those.
Well, I wish these people would get a life. Maybe they're from other parts of the country where they like the tagging.
Well, they're from a lot of different places, and they're here.
Tess, thank you for the call.
Mm-hmm.
Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Dave. And I'm Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. So, more and more states are advancing the heartbeat bills. Now, what is a heartbeat bill? It means that abortion is prohibited after you can detect the heartbeat of the child. More and more states could soon be joining Georgia and Ohio and others in adopting the so-called heartbeat abortion law that effectively bans abortion after 6 weeks. Louisiana and Alabama are already in the process of advancing similar or even stricter abortion bills, which ban abortion in most cases once a fetal heartbeat is detected. Now, the fascinating part about this legislation that is happening, it is not without echo. It is not without a response. Many people across the country have been horrified by the videos and the funding that the federal government gives to Planned Parenthood. Many people have been outraged at how the abortion industry continues to grow. Look at what you have in Virginia, where you had the governor on a radio show saying, hey, here you go. After the child is born, we'll decide whether or not we're going to let the child live. Now, we're not talking about Nazi Germany. We're talking about the United States of America. And then you have New York proudly talking about post-birth abortions. Well, this is not in a vacuum. This is not void. You have people in conservative states, most notably the ones in the South and the Midwest, saying enough already. This is not going to happen in this state. And we shall see whether or not the Supreme Court, Judge Kavanaugh and Justice Roberts, lives up to their reputation where people were fighting for this. Now, people are going to say this is harmful to women. This is going to be bad. What choice do these states have? What choice does the state of Idaho have, really? When you're looking at this heartbeat legislation, is that extreme? When you hear a heartbeat, is that extreme? Such laws are already facing stiff legal challenges from the ACLU and other organizations who claim these bills are unconstitutional. Well, where does Roe v. Wade draw the line? That's another question for all states. That's another question for the state of Idaho. And now you have others saying that this disproportionately affects minorities, women in poor communities when they're saying that they should have access to this. Again, how can you blame states that are saying we're not going to be Virginia, we're not going to be New York? I suppose we could solve all of our problems if we just made everything a states' rights issue, which we do for marijuana, but we don't do for marriage, which we do for, not even hemp, but other drugs like magic mushrooms, but we don't do for abortion. Now, the question to you on KIDO Talk Radio, what do you think of that abortion is making a comeback as a hot-button political issue? Obviously, I believe it will be a major factor in the 2020 elections, and these heartbeat bills, will they be enacted or struck down in court? I think it depends on the judge. And what scares many folks that disagree with the pro-life community is you have Donald John Trump slowly, methodically going through the Department of Justice, going through the circuits and the districts, nominating, getting them confirmed along with the Republicans in the Senate, conservative justices, which, let's face it, we haven't had probably since Ronald Reagan. You can't argue that Clinton's justices were conservative or President Bush's. Donald Trump, the man they want to remove from office, I guess that's why they want to remove him from office, because he's doing some good. And that's a good thing. God bless everybody. Keep the faith.